Welcome to the third season of the award-winning series Above and Beyond. My name is Valerie Feit, and I am the Enrichment Coordinator for the Rhinebeck District. Above and Beyond is your opportunity to meet some of the upcoming young people in our community who will one day be leaders. Today's guest is Mallory Shaner, an 11th grade high honor roll student who is a member of the Key Club, Students Against Drunk Driving, and the International and French clubs. She's also founder of Cakes for Kids. Welcome, Mallory.
Hi, Dr. Feit.
I wanted to talk to you about your baking, but first I just wanted to mention that you founded Cakes for Kids, and that's really the end point where we'll come back to that. But let's talk about baking, because really Cakes for Kids couldn't exist unless you were a baker. How did you start baking?
Well, when I was younger, when I was in 7th grade in middle school, I lost a lot of weight as a result of a sickness, and so I began baking as a form of eating a lot of calories easily, and it was a form of therapy for me. It was very relaxing and calming for me.
Did you have any pre-existing experience, like with, say, an Easy Bake Oven?
Yes, I did have an Easy Bake Oven when I was younger. My sister and I shared it. It was a lot of fun to play with.
But that wasn't necessarily it. It was maybe your mom baking?
Yeah, my mom is the one who really kind of freed my love for baking. I mean, she taught me how to make chocolate chip cookies and brownies and the pies at Thanksgiving and whatnot.
So put us in the kitchen. Your mom's baking and you're a little girl. What are you doing?
Well, it started out, she would just have me maybe like mix something for her while she was checking on something in the oven, or vice versa. Or while she was chopping, she'd have me like frost a cupcake or something. And then as I got older, she started letting me do more on my own, like maybe making a whole recipe while she was watching, or just doing it without her watching, and she'd just give me the recipe.
When you are working with recipes, like with your mom, was it old family recipes, or was it, recipes from a cookbook?
I think it's kind of a mix of both. Like, I would do some old traditional family recipes, like her banana bread recipe, but then there were also a lot of things from cookbooks, because I got a lot of them when I was younger.
As gifts?
Yes.
So you obviously were interested enough to get presents that were cookbooks, and then your mom would help supervise you doing that?
Yeah.
What was the sort of point at which you started to experiment, or when do you start to experiment? Did your mom experiment with her recipes?
My mom sort of did experiment. She'll make a recipe the correct way 2 or 3 times, and then she usually will start to wean herself off the recipe and sort of experiment and do it her own way to kind of give it a sense of her individualism.
So, say, take the banana bread, for example. What is special about the banana bread?
She adds chocolate chips into it.
Oh, no. So it's decadent banana bread.
It's very good.
So that is almost like a child fantasy, so that must have been very appealing. Do you know how to make that?
Yeah, I do, actually. I made it once. It's pretty simple. It's good when you have rotten bananas or overripe bananas.
Okay. When you started to first learn techniques, and I think that's really what distinguishes the sort of throw-it-together baker from a real baker, what were some of the early techniques that you learned?
Well, my mom taught me how to whisk. She taught me how to sift flour. And then I had a friend who taught me how to fold, which is when you combine 2 ingredients, but in a different way than just like mixing with a beater. And then I taught myself through a recipe, I taught myself how to temper.
Okay, now we're going to go back a bit because tempering sounds complicated, but what is the secret to whisking?
Well, whisking, you just want to make sure that you use the right type of whisk. Like, you don't want to use too big of a whisk or too small. And you also need to make sure, like, you're whisking the right thing. Like, you shouldn't whisk, like, a brownie mix, but you should whisk, like, eggs or something like that.
I never would whisk a brownie mix, really, swear. But with eggs, like, the purpose of whisking is what?
It's to make sure the yolk and the white get mixed together evenly.
Is it bad when it bubbles, like when air bubbles come up?
No.
That's a good thing. That's good.
That's fine.
Okay. So then what was it? You said whisking and then folding. What's the difference? Like, what is
Well, folding is when you take 2 separate mixtures and you fold them into each other with a spatula. Like, you kind of just keep turning them on top of each other.
Do you have to lift the batter and get air in? Is that part of it? Or
I think it's more of just evenly mixing two things without losing the distinct texture of each different mixture.
And somebody taught you this. So you were doing it and they said no, and they took it and they...
Yeah.
And then you practiced.
Uh-huh.
Okay, so now we're back to tempering. Okay, so what is tempering?
It's basically when you're making something, like it's when I make mac and cheese, when I'm making a roux, which is the base for the cheese sauce, and it's milk and flour. And you cook that on a stove, but you need to add egg to it, and you don't want to cook the egg. So what you have to do is you take a little bit of the thing that you're cooking on the stove, for in this example, the roux, and you put that into the egg mixture, and then you whisk that, and then pour it back into the full mixture, so you don't cook the egg, because you're just adding a little bit at a time.
So it'd be lumpy otherwise.
Yeah.
You'd end up with like a poached egg in the middle
Exactly.
of your roux. That would not be good. So, okay. What about other kinds of techniques? For example, things like getting a cake out of a pan, or things of that nature.
Well, I tend to use like a certain cooking spray to make sure that it gets out evenly and you don't have crumbs left over. But also, it helps if you just cut around the edge to make sure there's nothing stuck on. And some people like to run cold water over the bottom of the pan, but I personally don't think that's necessary.
Okay, well, okay, so that makes sense. When you're making something like, say, a sauce and you're reducing it, that doesn't scare you?
No.
So how do you reduce a sauce?
Well, you have to take certain ingredients out of it, and it's not super scary after you do it a couple of times, though.
Are you somebody, when you see a recipe and it asks you to make sort of a special step or something like, reducing something, or we've talked about tempering it or whatever, does that excite you, or do you get a little bit nervous about it?
To be honest, I get a little bit nervous at first, but once you do it the first time, you kind of feel confident for the next time, so you just kind of have to go into it thinking you have nothing to lose.
So you started learning these techniques, and you were baking with your mom, and were you making any experiments of your own at that point?
Not at this point. No, not yet.
Not yet. But then you became a little more serious. And how did that happen?
Well, once I got into high school, I became a member of all these different after-school clubs, and one of the things that they do are bake sales to raise money, so I would sign up to bake for them, and soon there would be so many bake sales during the week. I would just bake every night of the week, and I would bring in the baked goods the next day, and everybody would want something. They would reserve one the night before. Everybody knew when I was baking something. So
you became a little bit of a name in terms of the bake sale community, and you must have been a valued member of the clubs too.
I guess you could say that.
So you were getting enough practice because the bake sales were giving you the practice. At that point, did your technique and your product improve, or were you doing more or less what you'd learned with your mother?
It definitely improved. I was becoming more independent. I didn't need my mom's help in clarifying what an ingredient was, or how to do something, or how to turn on the oven or something like that.
So you're starting to really take command yourself. But you moved forward at that point, and you started to want to get, I guess, good at the presenting and the decorating part. I want to take a little time and talk about the decorating. How did you really learn to decorate?
Well, I actually took a cake decorating class at the Michael's craft store in White Plains.
And what do? You just call and sign up and then go?
Yeah, you can just call and sign up, or you can go to the store and sign up.
And what do they do in the class?
Well, the first week they teach you how to bake a perfect cake and how to frost a cake. And then they start teaching you stuff like how to make a flower, how to make a star, how to do certain borders on the side of the cake.
So how do you make a perfect cake?
Well,
what is a perfect cake? What does that mean?
It's perfectly cooked. There's no dome on the top when you take it out.
How do you get rid of that?
Well, actually, you have to make sure you put enough batter in the pan, even batter. And also it helps to put your cake in the center of the oven, and to make sure that the temperature is actually at 350, not at 325. And additionally, there are these certain aluminum bands that you can put around your pan to make sure that it bakes flat throughout.
Oh, okay. All right. And so you learned how to make the perfect cake, and that gives you the surface. But then what comes next?
Well, it's basically decorating cake. It's like a blank canvas, and you need to frost it perfectly also. And so they taught us the techniques for frosting a cake, how to lock in all the crumbs to make sure that they didn't come out and you couldn't see them when you were frosting the cake, and how to make the frosting very smooth and look like it's a piece of paper over the cake.
Now, is that a butter frosting or a sugar
Buttercream.
Buttercream frosting. Are there different kinds of buttercream frosting that you can make?
Well, there are obviously different flavors, but there's basically just the simple buttercream icing.
It seems to me some icings are thinner, some are thicker. Is that?
It depends on what you add, what sort of liquids you add, and how much of that liquid you add to it.
So why would I want a thinner icing?
Well, you usually use a thinner icing to ice a cake or do certain designs like leaves, and then you use a stiffer one to do roses and a medium to do like stars or other types of flowers.
What is it that you're using as a baker when you make special designs that are like, they look almost like they're sheets of icing?
Different,
what is that?
Different tips. Like we use different tips.
For the decorating part. I'm talking about, like, is it called frond or there's some name?
Oh, fondant.
Fondant. What is fondant?
It's just sort of like, I guess it's like an edible sort of clay thing. And it's made out of like flour and water and sugar. And it really is clay. Like, I mean, you can do anything with it. And a lot of people use it. I personally don't think it tastes very good. I don't use it very often, but it can help you create like a blank sheet onto your cake, and then you can build different things with it. And it just sort of helps you create that blank canvas you need to decorate a cake.
But really serious bakers like you don't necessarily use fondant. Is that, well, I guess if you're doing something like really sculptural, you might.
Exactly. It depends.
It depends. But in terms of, let's go back to like the tips and you use a harder icing to make flowers. And how do you learn that?
Well, we practice it in class, and they have this piece of cardboard and then a plastic sheet. And in between the plastic and the cardboard, they have these sheets of paper where it says, like, do 10 stars, and you do that on the plastic, and then you can just wipe it off when you're done.
Oh, that's nice. Or eat it. No, that would be me. Get a little sick. So you're practicing. And then what though kind of determines like the level of experience where you're actually capable of doing it? Like, for example, you made me a cake for a party. We're going to talk about that. And it was beautifully decorated, and all of the little flowers that you put around the edge were perfectly spaced. And I wondered how you knew how far to put them apart and not end up with too squished at the end or too much gap or whatever. How do you do that?
Well, the best part about decorating cakes is that you have more icing that you can always just cover up your mistakes with. But to be honest, it's sort of a physical memory thing where I've done that so many times, and since it was a circular cake, I always use the same pan, so it's always the same size circular cake. And so it's sort of like a physical memory. Like, I know how many to do because I do it so many times. Like, I know how far to put them apart so that I don't end up with that odd one out.
Do you get into it, this sounds funny, but almost like a trance when you're doing it?
Yeah.
What does it feel like?
I don't know. I kind of get in the zone. It's when like someone's studying really hard or they're playing baseball or something.
And that your focus is so complete that you are one with the icing? Okay.
I guess you could say that.
Okay. The most challenging cake, I mean, you've done a lot of cakes. I've seen a lot of your portfolio. They're absolutely gorgeous.
Thank you.
But which one was the most challenging for you, and can you tell us about it?
I think last year for the school musical, they give us lunch in February, over February break, because we spend our whole day at the school, and they asked me to make a cake for dessert for one of the lunches, and I think that was my hardest cake because it had to be big because it had to feed so many people, but also I wanted to outline the beast, how it looks on the playbill. And originally I was going to do a gel pattern transfer, which is a method of drawing onto cakes. But it didn't work. It's very hard to do, and I'm not very good at it, so I decided to do it freehand. And as a person, I'm not very good at drawing or anything related to art, so it was really challenging for me to do it freehand because I had to proportion it right and make sure it looked accurate.
And then you just did it, with looking at the program? Or
Yeah,
something?
I just kept looking at the cake and then the program and the cake and then the program while I was doing it.
Do you think that there's a relationship between you and pastry that would make it easier for you to draw with icing than, say, with a pencil?
I don't really know. I think maybe it's like with the consistency of the icing, it's definitely different than drawing with a pencil, but it might just be because it's something that I love so much, it's easier for me to do.
Because I saw a picture of that, and it's just a beautiful. You took the logo of the show, and it looks it looked fantastic.
Thank you.
Okay, so we're going to kind of tie this into another part of your life because you're much more than just a person who bakes cakes. You also are fluent in French. How did you come in contact with the French language?
Well, my mom actually is really good friends with this French family because her brother went to boarding school with this boy who was there on scholarship from France. And it was too expensive to fly home during Thanksgiving and Christmas, so he went home to stay with her family. And then his sister came over and his brother, and then they had kids, and they started visiting us, and we visited them. And I developed a really close relationship with one of his daughters, Marie, and I spent a summer with her 2 summers ago. I spent 6 weeks with her, and I just learned French.
So you're in an immersion environment.
Yeah.
It was like sink or swim kind of situation.
Basically, I mean, I was immersed in that culture, and it wasn't like they were going to just start speaking English at the drop of a hat for me.
So you had to speak French, and you became fluent in French over that period. What is it about the culture, though, that you love it? It wasn't just that your parents packed you off. This was something that you really wanted.
I absolutely adore it. It's because they're so proud of their country. They're so classy. They're always so advanced. They're so ahead of the curve, you know, with fashion and with food. And I just think it's such a beautiful culture between fashion, between food, between the languages. It's such a beautiful language.
And the lifestyle
It's so relaxed.
So you found that there's a sort of a simpatico between you and the French culture that fit your personality. So the French are obviously famous pastry bakers. So how does this wind back into, what is it about French pastry that's so special?
It's so simple. It's kind of just stripped down to its basic bare ingredients, and you can really taste what they want you to taste. Like, you can taste the chocolate, you can taste the sugar. It's not like English recipes where there's vanilla extract and baking soda and salt and all this extra stuff that isn't really necessary.
I used to love to watch the Julia Childs show, and I had actually, as a young person, younger than you, tried to make a cake which turned out to be about 6 inches round and weighed 3 pounds because there was no baking powder in it. Didn't seem to work well. What is it about the French method that makes it so the cakes are light?
To be honest, I don't really know. I mean, my first day there, I did bake something that didn't require baking soda, and it turned out fine. I think it must be something to do with the way their ovens work and the way they put ingredients in, the order that they put ingredients in, how long they bake for, and also the ingredients. I mean, the food over there, it's not as processed. There's not as many chemicals, so it must all interact differently chemically.
So are you fascinated by French baking? Do you think you would ever go and study baking in France?
I definitely want to study abroad there in college, and maybe if I'm there long enough, I'll end up taking a class in baking there.
I hope so. It would be definitely a boon for us if you did it. But you've taken your baking even to yet another level. Aside from the cultural aspect of your life, you have founded an organization called Cakes for Kids. Just tell me, like, first, what is Cakes for Kids?
Cakes for Kids is an organization that combines two of my personal favorite interests, kids, helping kids out, and baking cakes. And every kid loves cake. So there are 2 components to Cakes for Kids. There's the component where if you're having an event and you want a cake, then you can order one from me. There's an order form and everything. And the money that you pay for the cake with, it is donated to a charity of your choice, whether it be Make-A-Wish, Blessings in a Backpack, or the World Children's Fund. And the other component of Cakes for Kids is leadership training. I have a group of girls in the middle school who we have bake sales every other Wednesday, and they always bake. And it's part of training them to be young leaders in the school, because it's very hard in the middle school to be effective leaders and to feel like you're making a change because you're so much younger, you don't have as much freedom or independence.
So you're giving them a way to feel effective, where kids feel, I think, really helpless, but they see the problems in the world and they want to help out. Did you deliberately pick children's charities?
Yes.
And why was that important to the middle school crowd, for example?
Well, I want them to feel like they can relate to these kids, you know? I mean, maybe they can't, I mean, maybe it's hard to because they're in Africa, they're starving, or, you know, they're local and they just don't have enough money for food. But I wanted to feel like they could relate so that they had a real motivation for helping them.
That's clear from the from the charities that you've chosen. Just really briefly, let's go over the 3 that you did choose and describe what they do. So let's start with Make-A-Wish. What do they do?
Well, Make-A-Wish grants wishes to children who are terminally ill or under a lot of stress from an illness. And they can grant a wish anything from going to Disneyland to meet their favorite Disney princess, or to meeting a movie star, or maybe going overseas to visit Paris or London.
So they need funding for that. So that would be a choice. So you've identified these 3 charities, and people who purchase a cake from Cakes for Kids can choose one of the 3. So it's Make-A-Wish, and then
Blessings in a Backpack, which is more on a local spectrum. It helps children whose families were hit hard by the recession, and they're given backpacks every Friday at school that are filled with non-perishables, and they get new non-perishables every Friday, and they just bring the backpack to school. So, and it's really easy to help. All you have to do is donate a backpack, and $70 can feed one family for a month.
So if you do a bake sale, what is your typical revenue from a bake sale?
I'd say about $90 or $100.
Really? Well, that's because you're such a good baker. But
Thank
so
you.
you make that. So you can actually say to these middle school leaders, we made $70 or actually more, so 2 bake sales, and you could be feeding 2 families easily.
And then we divide the money 3 ways so that it's even for each charity.
In the bake sales. But let's just go back to the Cakes for Kids, where we would say hire you. Like, I had a party recently and I decided to do Cakes for Kids, and I must say you made me a fabulous cake.
Thank you.
Just tell our audience a little bit about the choices, because they were fantastic. It was a lot of fun for me to get to choose.
Well, it's important when you're making a cake, you want to keep the customer's needs in mind. So it's important. The choices that we have are cake flavor, frosting flavor, what size you want your cake is super important, what colors of frosting you want it to be decorated with, the design of your cake, like what do you want it to be decorated with, flowers, with roses, with tulips, and then also what you want your cake to say, and then as another option, what you want to fill your cake with, if you want to fill your cake with something.
Well, I know that when I did it, it felt like I was getting special attention. Well, I was getting special attention, but because each of your customers gets that. And then when the cake came out, it was so nice because it was so unique. And it was something that no one else had ever had because I chose with you. And so I would, definitely recommend it. My guests were thrilled because they knew that they were getting more than dessert, that this actually had helped some children, made a big difference. So if somebody in our audience wanted to engage your services and was having a party for kids, or even cupcakes, right? Anything, how would they get hold of you?
Well, my email is best, cakesforkids123@gmail.com.
So it's real simple, cakesforkids123@gmail. Okay, so then they just write to you and say, hey, I'm interested, and then you delivered my cake, which was really fabulous.
Door to door.
Door to door. Okay, that makes sense. And I know you can order online too, so that's really exciting. Between the leadership training, I just want to go between the 2 things. I'm wondering how you get it all in, but I just want to go back to the leadership training. What do you have to put into, not the baking part and running the bake sale, but what is the leadership training itself?
Well, the middle schoolers, they need to understand. I mean, it's hard. They're younger, and they don't have as much experience in this sort of thing. So they need to understand that a bake sale, it's not just showing up to the bake sale with the goods. It's you have to fill out paperwork, make sure that the principal knows you're holding this bake sale. You have to inform the custodial staff so they know to put a table out. And you also have to have change in a cash box. And then you can't just show up to the place with, something from Stop and Shop. You need to put in effort into this because you are helping children and you can't do it half-heartedly. So
these kids, essentially what you're doing is you're taking their dream of making a difference and you're breaking it down to really fundamental practical steps that they can take, and then ultimately they do make the difference.
Yeah, and it's easy. Everyone has a kitchen. Everyone can bake a thing of chocolate chip cookies.
So that's really exciting, and I know that in your school it's really building up, that you're getting more and more kids to get involved with this.
Yes, we're working very hard.
Very exciting project. So now we get to my other question, which is how you do it. You are a high honor roll student, you're a member of a number of clubs, you're running an organization. How do you do it?
I think it's important. Time management is very important. Also, I catch up on sleep on the weekends. A lot of sleep because I stay up late baking. When I have like a ton of homework, I'll bake after musical rehearsal. But it's also important to use your time wisely. Like if I have a study hall in school, I'll usually do like some math homework then or some Spanish homework, because it's really important to use every minute that you have so that you can make sure that you put your best effort into everything and you don't want to rush through your schoolwork.
No, that's super important, because ultimately your future is probably not as a baker, although you will keep baking.
Yes, of course.
What is it you really would like to do?
Well, I know I definitely want to do something with the French language. I mean, it's my passion. It's something that I'm good at. It's something that I love more than anything. And I've considered a career as a mediator in the United Nations or being a stockbroker for an international company because I love finance and math.
So your other strength is math?
Mm-hmm.
Very interesting. That's really cool. That's really cool. So you're going to go to college, and you're not going to culinary school like that?
No, I don't think so.
You seem to me to be somebody who'd be you are a wonderful role model for younger kids. But if you had to give advice to younger students, let's go slowly with that. Like, what do they need to do to be good students?
Again, with time management, using your time wisely. Also, pay attention in class and work hard from the very beginning. I know a lot of, like my classmates, they often will say like, oh, I wish I could redo freshman year because I didn't try hard enough, and now they're a junior and they've missed so much, like they feel like they could have done so much better. But also, it's important to pay attention in class, like don't fall asleep, but also sleep is really important at night. So if you don't get all your work done, you can always just wake up earlier and do it the next morning, but you need to get a good night's rest because it'll keep your brain focused and re-energize your brain for the next day.
And you can't just eat cake.
No. I wish.
So you eat well. I mean, you don't just eat cake, so you eat well, right?
Yes, I wish I could just eat cake though.
All right. And then what about like if they want to make a difference? How do kids contact you, and what is really your advice if a child, maybe they don't want to bake, but how do you explain to kids what making a difference is all about?
You want to have an impact on the world, and it's important to help people out. And even if you don't want to bake, you should do it through something that makes you happy. If you like collecting things, like maybe I know there was a student at Rhinebeck who collected shoes, kids with soul, and so you want to make sure that you're doing something that you love because you're going to be doing it for a while if you're trying to make a difference.
So stay with it and try to find something that you can manage for yourself. That is really wonderful. I just have this beautiful vision of you in your life going forward, and that you're going to be an international mediator and a star baker.
So. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. It's been a pleasure to having you.
Thank you, Dr. Feit.
That is it for now. That's the end of our show, and I'm delighted that you were able to join us. I would like to have you see some of our previous episodes. Above and Beyond is the name of our show, and you can go to LMC-TV's website and then click on Videos on Demand, and then Single and Series Programming, and then Above and Beyond. I want to thank our producer, director, and editor, Remy Litvin, a 12th grader at Rhinebeck High School, the LMC-TV staff, and our wonderful volunteer crew. My name is Valerie Feit. Please join us again when we meet another student who goes above and beyond. And thank you for watching.